Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, as-salatu was-salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Welcome everybody. My name is Bilal Abdul Kareem and we are coming at you live from where? Northern Syria. Well, it's not New York. We are here on Salam Media. We want to thank everybody for having me, and we're here to talk about some very, very important issues. Now, we're going to be focusing a lot on the Syrian civil war, how it started, where it's going, and what it's going to take to win. We have a very special guest who's going to be joining us in just a little while. You probably already know who it is. So if you don't know who it is, I'm not going to tell you who it is until we're ready to bring her on. Okay, first of all, I would like to everybody know that I am with OGN, which is On the Ground News. And you can find us on social media, OGN, or you can find us at Bilal Kareem on Twitter. So after having said all of that, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the things that we are working on as we're going forward. Okay. The Syrian Civil War. The Syrian Civil War began in 2011. It started out as the people asking for, and I said asking for, their basic rights. It didn't start out as a hot war, people firing on each other or so on and so forth. There were some youths in Dara who spray painted on a wall something that said, "Your next doctor," meaning Dr. Bashar al-Assad, the president of the country. These were some young kids, about 13 years old, 12 years old. But the security services thought it would be a good idea, for some reason, to take them and torture them and then basically spit them out of their prison. That set off the people. Now, don't be misled into thinking that that's all that happened, because you had decades of torture and injustice at the hands of Bashar al-Assad's father, Hafez al-Assad, who ruled the country along with his son for decades. So the people had basically had it up to here. And then when these young men were tortured, I'm not going to say young men, I'm going to say children, because at 12, 13, you're not a young man yet. I wonder if my son feels the same way. But the point of the matter here is that they were not adults, and they were beaten and they were tortured, and then they were sent back to their families, almost as if they were saying, "Ha, see, this is what happens, and this is what's going to happen to anybody who wants to do more of this." Once that happened, the people began to take to the streets and they began to ask for rights. I said ask. As things went along, what began to happen? The security services, and at the behest of Bashar al-Assad, you would think that they would say, look, these were some children. It's understandable that these people are unhappy, but they didn't understand it in that fashion. Basically, what they did is they began to fire upon the protesters. This is back in 2011. And that's when the protesters began to take up arms, and they began to respond to government aggression. It wasn't a situation where they were demanding, they were saying, we want our rights. But then once they started to be fired upon, it became a firm, solid demand. If we don't get it, then we're going to fight. And that's exactly what took place. And this is back in 2011. By 2012, there was a full-blown civil war that was deemed to be a civil war by the United Nations, as battles broke out throughout the country. We're talking about from the Damascus area, the Homs area, northern Syria, and fighting was taking place all over the place. Now, the Free Syrian Army was formed towards the middle part of the summer in 2011. That was the first organized resistance force that was at play here in Syria. By early 2012, other Islamic groups began, Islamically oriented groups, I should say, began to enter the fray. And we're talking about Jabhat al-Nusra. I'm sure people have heard of that group. Ahrar Sham was there just a little bit before Jabhat al-Nusra was. Jund al-Aqsa and other groups. At that time, there was no ISIS. As things went forward, the battles became more and more intense. Government forces were losing territory on a weekly basis. There was a lot of territory that was lost around the Damascus area, the Homs area, and the northern Syria area. Now, just so that people can understand the context in terms of what was happening at that time, there's a place in Homs called Hawla. This area was a place where government forces had besieged the towns around the Hawla area, and they made a massacre. They butchered men, women, and children. Some were shot, some were hit by missiles, some had their throats cut. Hear what I'm saying? Some had their throats cut. It was a massacre by what are known as shabiha, or in other words, this is a derogatory term to describe the worst of those people who work for the government. This is the backdrop. Now, we're going to talk more about that backdrop as a little further down the line, because now, these days, you have Bashar al-Assad trying to work his way back into the fold of the international community. At any rate, as time went on, the Syrian civil war had the Bashar al-Assad's troops on the ropes. And that's when, in 2016, Russia entered the fray. They came in with their advanced planes and weapons, and it turned the tide of the civil war back in the favor of Bashar al-Assad. They bombed hospitals, they bombed schools, they bombed residential areas, they used chemical weapons. And during the siege of Aleppo, which I was a part of, chemical weapons were used. I've smelled them. I've driven the victims to the hospital. It's for real. So if they try to tell you that, that never really happened, what do you mean? You know that it's for real. Now, as we go forward, Russia begins to bombard the rebel-controlled territories, and one by one they fell. The areas around Damascus fell back into the hands of the regime. The areas of Homs fell back into the areas of regime. Now, in northern Syria, it's the last areas that are controlled by rebel forces, and we're talking about those towns on the Turkish border. So that's a bit of a thumbnail sketch in terms of what happened to the Syrian civil war. So we're here to discuss something, though. Where are we today? Well, in the Idlib area, you have a group known as Hayat Tahrir Sham, who is in charge of the administration of that area. They were at one point looked at as an Islamic group that was calling for Islamic Sharia, which they were calling for it. However, once they seized power, they were no longer interested in Sharia. So today, you have indefinite detention, you have torture, you have no representation, and so on and so forth. This is the situation currently in northern Syria in the Idlib side. On the other side of, or I should say a bit more to the east, you have another dynamic where you have Turkish-backed groups which took territory away from the Kurdish militia forces that were plaguing Turkey for many years. And the Kurdish militia forces were forced out of areas from all the way from Genderes, Afrin, all the way to places called Jarablus. Now, That's where we are today. Judicially, you have the pretty much the same situation in the eastern part, in the territories backed by Turkey, that you have in the Idlib area, except that it's a little bit better on the Turkish side of the divide. Why? Because they don't have capital punishment. Now, that's something that's going to be very important going forward, because when you have torture, indefinite detention, and no lawyers, and I mean, no one to represent you, then you're going to really struggle to prove to people who want to execute you that you shouldn't be executed, especially doing it from the inside of a jail cell. I myself spent more than 6 months in solitary confinement in the Hayat Tahrir Sham prison. The sounds of torture could be heard, and it was not a lot of fun. Okay, now that we've got this idea, we want to bring our guest on. And she's actually, well, I'm pretty sure she can hear me, but I'm going to praise her a little bit here. So by the time that she actually gets a chance to scold me for praising her, I would have already done it by now because we didn't bring her on yet. Okay, so she is my sister, Dr. Yvonne Ridley, and she is a journalist and an activist. And she's been a journalist going back many years ago. At one point, she was a prisoner of the Taliban during a time when she was not Muslim. She was very curious in terms of what was going on in Afghanistan back in 2001. And she thought that it would be a good idea to put on a burqa and go and take some pictures. Well, it didn't really work out quite so smoothly. She ended up being a prisoner of the Taliban, but it worked out very well, not only for her, but also for the Muslim Ummah, because she, based upon their treatment of her and other things, ended up accepting Islam. And she's become one of the biggest and strongest voices advocating Muslims and Islamic rights. And I'd like to bring on Dr. Yvonne Ridley. Sister, Assalamu alaikum. Are you there?
Walaikum salam. Yes. Thank you for that introduction.
Well, you definitely deserve it, and we're very happy to have you here. How are you doing?
Yes, everything's fine. The fasts in Scotland, where I'm living, are about 16 hours. So if my voice is sounding a bit croaky, that's what it's down to. I'm nearing the end of a very long fast.
Well, it's not a problem. We just broke our fast. Can't you see how rosy my cheeks are? So,
I know.
Sister Yvonne, I have to ask you a question. Um, First of all, we're going to talk about what it takes to win a revolution, particularly here in Syria. But we can't begin this discussion without talking about something in the form of justice. Now, I know you've told this story many times. If you could give us a brief idea in terms of how the treatment you received when you were a prisoner of the Taliban, and your activism and your becoming Muslim years later, how did that play a role in you becoming the Dr. Yvonne Ridley, the Muslim activist that we know? What was the connection between the two?
Well, the imprisonment by the Taliban triggered me on, set me on a journey, which was to find out more about Islam. And had they treated me differently, I probably wouldn't have looked that closely into Islam. But I noticed, because of the way they practiced their Islam, that it was more than just a religion that was picked up on a Friday and put down again after Friday prayers. It was the way they ate, the way they slept, the way they conducted themselves, the way they said Bismillah as they entered a room. Everything that they did was attached to or revolved around Islam. It was, they lived and breathed their religion, which was good for me because it meant that they followed a strict code on the treatment of prisoners, which sadly your captors didn't when you were locked up for 6 months. And because they never wavered in their strength of deen, it obviously impacted on the people around them as well. And there is absolutely no way the Taliban could have been victorious in Afghanistan without the support, the popular support of the people. And that's because they had the trust of the people.
When we're talking about what it takes to win, what it takes to win the Civil War, we can't move past. I'm sorry?
Purity of heart.
Purity of heart, and it's very important to have the trust of the people. If the people are feeling that it's business as usual, just we traded one zalim or oppressor for another, what kind of impact do you think that's going to have?
Well, as I say, the Taliban could not have been victorious because when it came down to numbers, they were facing a highly trained army with 300,000 soldiers, and there was only 76,000 Taliban. So the odds were stacked against them. But they had a belief in their heart, which was not there for the Afghan National Army. Their soldiers, although they had the best kit, the RoboCop helmets, the night vision, all this state-of-the-art warfare, they had all of that, but they had nothing in their hearts. They didn't believe in what they were fighting for, and they weren't holding on tight to the rope of Allah. In fact, the moment that things got a slightly bit tough, they dropped the rope and ran. The journey into Kabul for the Taliban was easy, alhamdulillah. They were able, most of it was achieved without fighting. But the secret with the Taliban is that they held on tight to the rope of Allah, which anyone from the American military listening in, and I bet they are, will be thinking, what is she talking about? Mm-hmm. But it was so important. Their belief, their trust in each other, they were unbeatable in spirit, and but they were also patient. Don't forget, they'd been out of power for 20 years, and it was 20 years in the making that they were able to plan and achieve their goals. And once
what about recruitment?
Sorry?
What about recruitment? When you have no justice system, how are you going to recruit people? Now, keep in mind, now you said it started with 76,000. Mm-hmm. It was understood that during the 20 some odd years of war with the Americans, around 50,000 Taliban were killed. How were they able to replenish their numbers?
They attracted so many people because of this strong core belief, this unity. And you I look at Syria in despair because it's so fragmented. All the desperate groups that are in Syria at the moment. There's only ever been the Taliban. There's only ever been one leader, Mullah Mohammed Omar, and then the supreme leaders that followed on from there. Their loyalty, even when decisions are made that we look at and think, what are they doing? Their loyalty is unwavering. The business of girls' education, I've yet to meet anyone who agrees with the decision that came from Kandahar that girls of a certain age should not go to school. And they did keep saying it's not a ban, it's a postponement. But their soldiers have kept the faith. Mm-hmm. They might not understand it, they might not agree with it, but they have been unwavering. And their sense of justice is something that really appealed to ordinary people who didn't get a sense of justice, who saw the Western installed puppets swaggering around, big fancy cars, a lavish lifestyle, mm-hmm. and the West making all sorts of promises of money and sending the money over, and it stuck. It didn't filter down to the grassroots. That's because the governments installed in Kabul were corrupt. Some of them were thieving that money and putting it into their pockets. And
in talking about what it takes to win, you're talking about now what it takes not to win, which is to let there be a clear separation between the haves, meaning those who are in power, and those who have not.
Yeah.
That's a clear way to make it clear that people will not support you.
It was unfair. It wasn't justice. It wasn't what people would imagine. And this is what I would say to the leadership of HTS in Syria is wake up, because nothing is by force in Islam. And everything about Islam is wrapped in justice. And if you betray the people, they are going to see right through you. And come the day when you need their support and you shout for them, nobody will come and help you.
Well, I want to just let everybody know an initiative that we are working on actually right now. And Dr. Yvonne Ridley has been supporting us. I want to show you a very brief video here that's about the Journalist Training and Education Center that we are running here in northern Syria. Basically, what is this about? This is empowering the people. Now, we're going to continue with Dr. Yvonne about what it's going to take to win in this civil war here in northern Syria, but take a brief look at this video here, our initiative.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Bilal Abdul Kareem and I am a journalist, but you already know that part. So what am I doing here? Well, we want to announce the Journalist Education and Training Center for Refugees. What's that all about? Well, we are now going to give back to these communities. What we want to do is train the people who've lost their homes to have a career in journalism. Now, I've been in journalism for about 20 years now. So now this is my opportunity to give something back to the people, give them an opportunity to earn money, to take care of their families, and to give them an opportunity that they can now move away from needing aid or a food box or donations now. Aid, food box, and donations are good, and they do need it, but it's time to break the cycle, and you can help do that. Why don't you click the link below, and you can find out more about our program and what we're trying to do here, and how you can help, especially in this blessed month of Ramadan. Let's give these people an opportunity to move forward and to move past the years of war. You know the saying, give a man a fish, feed him for a day. Teach him how to fish, feed him for a lifetime. My name is Bilal Abdul Kareem. Jazakumullahu khaira. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
All right. I guess that was what you'd call just a, a little commercial there. So if someone, or if you would like to find out more information about that, you can actually just go to my Twitter page, Bilal Kareem, that's Bilal, Kareem, Kareem. It's pinned at the top, and the link is there. You can find out more, because we're all about trying to empower the people. And inshallah ta'ala, the Syrian people are not a lazy people. They're people who work, but they need some opportunities. And we're here to try to create some of those opportunities. Okay, back to our topic at hand, which is the Syrian civil war and what it takes to win. Dr. Yvonne, you are very familiar with the Justice Covenant, which is a document basically that was concocted by a group of lawyers. As odd as it sounds, a group of South African lawyers who are Muslims and have good Islamic knowledge put together what's called the Justice Covenant. This basically enshrines the rights of prisoners from the time of their arrest until the time of their trial. It calls for 4 main points, which is no torture, no indefinite detention. All detainees are deemed and treated as if they are innocent until proven guilty. And fourthly, every detainee has the right to appear before a judge within 48 hours of their detention. Now, some people are going to be sitting there saying, they're going to say, hey, you know what? That sounds really, really good, Bilal. But are you having a problem implementing it there? Well, the reality of the situation is as follows. We are basically spreading this amongst the common people and not amongst the power brokers, because the power brokers are enjoying the status quo. Now, Dr. Yvonne, my question to you here is, tell me something about people power. The power of what's called in Arabic the Hadina Sha'biyya, or the popular support from amongst the people. Can they win a civil war? Yes or no?
Yes, people power can achieve all sorts. You know, you mentioned South African lawyers. Well, South Africa is a great example of people power and endurance. And Nelson Mandela, everybody that, you know, at one point he was the most famous man in the world, and he led his people to a victory that no one could have imagined 30, 40 years ago. But he did it. And he did it because he was one man who had the respect of all Africans. Even his enemies respected him. And even though he was in prison for 27 years, the respect and the support that he had increased rather than fell away. And when you have a great leader like that, it's very difficult. It's just very difficult to ignore.
When we're talking about I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, once he took power, you would have thought that he might have gone a little crazy, 27 years in prison, find out those who were responsible, punish them. But what he did, he then introduced a peace and reconciliation process, which was incredible, where everyone was held to account. And in the end, the South Africans were able to overcome decades and decades of brutality and forgive their persecutors. Now, this is a great lesson, and I would urge the leader, the rebel leader in Idlib, to look into the history of the apartheid movement, the injustice that was born, the victory that came out of that injustice, and then what followed after that, more justice, and the ability for his people to get closure through forgiveness. Now, forgiveness is a huge part of Islam. And in fact, the Sharia law is designed in such a way that it's very unusual, even for someone who's committed a really heinous crime. It's very difficult to enforce the execution of that person because there are so many get out clauses on the way to the executioner's block. And that shows the mercy and forgiveness of Islam. And really, I would urge HTS that if they want victory, they must be pure in heart and they have got to be sincere in delivering justice to the people, because one day they will call on the people to back them up. They will call on the people to help them. And that goodwill might have been frittered away by their bad behavior. And I know that there has been bad behavior there. And it's no use shooting the messenger either. They should listen and take a large slice of humble pie when they have their zuhur and reflect on what I'm saying. I'm not their enemy. I would love nothing more than to see the rebels overpower and win that country back from Assad and that brutal dynasty. There's no justice in the ranks of the Assad army. And, well, it's not for me to say that they've left the fold of Islam, but some of the things that they have done, especially to the women prisoners, are not Islamic at all.
And that's one of the ways to lose power, because if we go back and we're talking about what it takes to win, well, let's look at what it takes to lose. Bashar al-Assad was controlling this entire country. Right now, he controls, actual control, something to the tune of around 45% of the country. Now, just because there's a nominal presence there, you have Kurdish militia forces that are in control of large territories of the country. You have U.S. forces in control of other parts of the country. You've got rebel-controlled territory in the north. So people have this misnomer that Bashar al-Assad has won the civil war. He still hasn't gotten back 50% of control of his country. So that can't be seen as a win. Now, rebels forces can't be seen as winners either, because they've been on the back foot for a number of years now. But the reality, as I see it, is that there's a lot of hope for this civil war. Now, some people are going to sit there and say, whoa, Bilal, what are you talking about? Look, the hope that I see for this civil war is as follows. First of all, there are still a lot of good people here. But there's one thing that I think that they were missing, which is an actual thing in which they could all agree to. This is why we put forward the Justice Covenant, and we're launching this campaign in just a few short days. Because this, I mean, who would not want to sign on to no torture? Well, only the interrogator, right? But amongst the common people, you know, they don't have any interrogators. And those are the people who we are targeting. No indefinite detention. Sounds reasonable to me. I couldn't think of any person who would be a civilian and then say indefinite detention is a good idea. Having to appear before a judge within 48 hours, and the innocent and each suspect is innocent until proven guilty. Now, we framed it this way because this is an actual written document that we want the authorities to sign, but not yet. We want the people to demand it from the authorities, because then it would have to be implemented because the people are going to be watching. Now, Sister Yvonne, you have more experience than me. Now, usually I'm considered to be the one who has much experience here where I am, but you are my senior in that regard. So I'm asking you, you've been to Palestine, you've been to Afghanistan, you've been to Pakistan, and that's just for starters. In your estimation, what is the key to gaining popular support, particularly under circumstances that we're under right now here in northern Syria? How can we bring the people together?
Justice, just through justice. It's as simple as that. When you have 2 or 3 different levels of justice, that will bring unrest and civil disobedience. And, you know, you mentioned about the graffiti boys of Dara. Why were they tortured? You know, it is, what was the purpose of it? And I can only think, yeah, it was, but it backfired because everybody was so enraged, they rose up. And that's where the birth of this revolution started, from the ashes of torture, from injustice. So the best way to get the people on your side is to deliver justice. And, you know, for about 10 years before the Taliban took over, they were running a parallel judicial system in the south of Afghanistan.
Okay.
In which people would rather get justice from the Taliban than go and wait for months, if not years, from one of the most corrupt governments in Asia.
That's how they were able to continue to replenish their numbers.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, everywhere you go in Afghanistan, the martyrs are buried where they fall. So on the main roadways, you can't go more than even half a mile without seeing a grave, somebody who has fought and paid the blood price for his country. And these martyrs are honored and revered. And it was only natural that as one fell, 10 more were ready to take their place. And it goes back to belief as well, and unity. Unity is very, very key. You know, when the Taliban did take power in Kabul, it must have been the most intoxicating event for a lot of these young men to suddenly realize their dreams of
after 20 years
and seeing off the Americans. It must have been a very intoxicating experience, and it went to the heads of some. And what hasn't or is rarely reported is the Taliban fired or expelled about 2,000 soldiers from its ranks. Why? These men, these boys, were prepared to die for the cause. Well, they let it go to their head. They defied orders. One of the first orders was no revenge. And of course, these young men are now in control. Who killed their father? Who killed their uncle? Who tortured in prison? Right, we're going to pay back. So there was a lot of payback, which was against orders. And so they were kicked out. The Taliban, they might all have different dresses and different style turbans, but they have one direction, and they might not look.
If I could, I just want to just jump in here before you go too far with this, because I'm sure you are familiar with Sheikh Abdul Salam Daif, Mullah Abdul Salam Zaif.
Yes.
He was the representative of the Taliban to Pakistan at the time of the September 11th attacks in 2001. He was subsequently arrested by the Pakistani government and renditioned to the Americans, wherein he spent approximately 2.5 years in Guantanamo Bay prison. Now, he was an ambassador. He was an ambassador, and he ended up in Guantanamo Bay. He was tortured in Guantanamo. Now, I wanted to give all of this as a bit of a background because I had a conversation when I was in Qatar a couple of years ago with one young man who was a supporter of ISIS. And I was trying to explain to him, I know these ISIS people, they're not what you think that they are. And you're not going to achieve anything by following behind them. Well, he didn't agree. He said, and he felt that if we caught, meaning ISIS, a soldier, a US soldier, that we would certainly torture him. I told him that that would be the wrong thing to do. Well, he accused me of being soft and so on and so forth. As it would have it, that night we were scheduled to have dinner at Mullah Abdul Salam Daif's house. And I said to him, well, he has sufficient Islamic knowledge, and he also has knowledge of the affairs on the ground because he was in Guantanamo Bay prison with the Americans. So let's put the situation to him. We agreed that he has the ability to judge between the two of us. So we went to his house. We had dinner. And after dinner was over, I asked him the question. And I said, if an American soldier had fallen into the hands of some Muslim force, after the years that they tortured Muslims, killed them, and so on and so forth, would you recommend to torture that soldier? And I remember he sat there and he was stroking his beard like this. And he didn't say anything until I completely finished. And he was looking at the ground. Then he looks up. And then he says, we are not a people of revenge. We are a people who are here to establish our religion, not to take revenge. Now, when you have people like that who are clear in terms of who they are, not who the other oppressors want them to be, because I'm sure that the enemies of the Taliban wanted them to be barbarians, so they couldn't gain popular support, they couldn't replenish their ranks, and therefore it made it easier for the enemy to keep dwindling down their ranks and making it easier for them to ultimately finish the war. Well, that didn't happen. And when Mullah Abdul Salam Daif said that we are not a people of revenge, we are here to establish our religion. If I didn't know it before then, I was clear that the Taliban were going to win, inshallah, that civil war.
Yeah, well, it just shows the power of wisdom as well. And he was treated terribly by the Americans. He was mocked and ridiculed when he was handed over by the ISI in Pakistan to the Americans. He was stripped naked, he was humiliated. You know, that is not Islam. You might have the power, but you don't have to dispense justice in such a manner. You, I remember having a similar conversation with somebody, funnily enough, in Qatar, and it was at the time when a Jordanian airman had his jet had been shot down, and he was caught by ISIS, and they put him in a cage and set fire to him. And it was very public, and it was barbaric, and the usual, you know, films were taken and put up on YouTube, and it was shocking. And I said, that is not Islam. And this brother said to me, what do you think they did to our people? Well, we have to be better than that. We have to be on the high moral ground.
Absolutely.
And I remember as a kid at school being taught about the Crusades. Obviously, it was a very one-sided dialogue about this great King Richard, the Lion Heart, and this big hero. But the history teacher also told us about Saladin and what a great warrior he was, and how wise he was, and how compassionate he was. And when he heard that Richard the Lionheart's horse had died from a previous battle, he sent two of the finest Arab horses as replacements. You know, showing kindness to your enemy is a very, very powerful weapon. And for a school kid in the northeast of England to be taught about Saladin at such an early age, hundreds of years later, shows how powerful wisdom can be. You know, I would urge all of those HTS fighters and leaders to think about legacy. What is your legacy? Is it torture? Is it heroic behavior? Is it wisdom? Is it justice? And what do you want your legacy to be about? What do you want school children to be taught about you? That you were a just and honest leader, or that you were an ignorant brute? You know, think about it. Think about legacy. And ambassadors to Islam, they have a duty to do the right thing.
And I want to add something here. If you look at mafia-style behavior, mafias only rule certain territories. Or what I'm saying is that if they want to take over the entire Middle East, and I'm not just talking about HTS, I'm talking about any Muslim organization or group, you don't have to fight everybody. The Middle East is rampant with injustice, torture, indefinite detention, and the people are hungry for someone that they can support who's going to bring them something that they basically never really had, which is justice. So if you want to have real power, if that's what you're after, we should be after the pleasure of Allah first and foremost. But even if we would say someone who is not a Muslim, how much more so if they're Muslim? If you are serious about power and about bringing good to the people, because most people, even a Zalim, feels like I'm the only one that can bring good to the people. But the way to do that is by giving them justice, being just to the people. And then not only will 10 people follow you, you'll have 10,000 people who will follow you because they feel that they're a part of something. And that's what happened in the beginning of the Civil War. So many people were they were spending their own money to buy their own weapons, spending their own money to buy fuel and this and that, is because they felt they were a part of something. When money came in, it became a bit organized, if you want to call it that, and then it became controlled. But it wasn't controlled by the rebel forces that were on the level of the people, it was by bigger powers. And they all ultimately allowed certain individuals to run rampant. But those individuals don't realize that the reason why they have that license is because the people who are over them understand they don't want them to get so powerful. They don't want it because then they will be too difficult to control. So by having the people relatively weak, then that plays into the hands of other interests, but not the interests of the Syrian people. So once again, I want to just reiterate that if the people really want power, justice is the way to get it, because the people will then empower you. What do you think?
You just have to look at what is happening in Saudi Arabia at the moment with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He has locked up a friend of mine, Dr. Ahmed Farid Mustafa, who is 84 years old. By locking him up, MBS looks so weak. You know, this big strapping crown prince locking up an 84-year-old man. How weak does that make him look, that he feels that he has to lock this old man away because he
Can you tell us something about this doctor?
Yes, he was actually born in Egypt, and his service to the Saudi kingdom was such. He was an engineer and an architect, and he was involved in a lot of the design and buildings in Saudi Arabia in the 60s and 70s. So he was given, he did such a good job that the royal family showed their appreciation by giving him Saudi citizenship. He had a home in Medina, a very God-fearing man. He was my spiritual mentor. And he's also outspoken. Well, I'm saying outspoken. Conversations that you and I would think are perfectly normal are not acceptable across the table in Saudi. And so he was critical of the brutality of the Saudi regime, and he was arrested, and he's been in prison now without trial, without charge, for 2 to 3 years. We know he's alive because I got in touch with my local politician who contacted the Saudi ambassador in London. And we rocked the boat to find out what was going on. And we were told that he's awaiting trial. Of course, he hasn't been charged with anything. But it just makes Mohammed bin Salman look so weak that he has to keep this God-fearing old man locked up. And I know that Dr. Mustafa will, his belief in Allah will not have wavered. He will be as committed as the day that he went in. And please everyone pray, inshallah, that he gets released soon. But there are some great scholars. Salman al-Auda is
Yeah.
locked up as a prisoner. By locking up a man of such knowledge, how weak does that make you look? And it's
Look, I'm going to just tell you, I'm going to come right out and I'm going to say this. Maybe some people are not going to like what I'm getting ready to say, but Arabs are not known for even thinking anything of popular support. They feel as long as they have the guns and they have the money, the popular support does not matter.
well, then I would say to those Arabs, read your history books. Read how the Romanian Revolution saw an end of the Ceausescu regime. And that all happened. You know, we tend to think of things happening over a period of months or years. That happened in under 2 weeks, which surprised me when I was reading up on it a few months ago. And the people who really were poor, they had nothing, they were living under this Ceausescu, who was a brute of a man. And one day something just snapped and the people rose up. And within 2 weeks, Ceausescu was put against a wall and shot by his own people.
Mm-hmm.
And I suspect that Mohammed bin Salman is not going to die peacefully in bed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my prediction. Unless he wakes up and shakes up and realizes what he's doing, he's not going to have a peaceful end.
Well, we're coming to the end of our program here. But I kind of just want to reiterate because the title of this thing is What It Takes to Win. And we should have called What It Takes to Win and What It Takes Not to Win. You see, if we're looking at Mohammed bin Salman's situation, he feels that he has enough financial support. He's got the money coming in. He's doing all kinds of wild projects, building this mukab, which is a Kaaba shaped building, which would be huge in Riyadh and will be able to house, I think they said something like 21 Empire State Buildings. Why are the Muslims in need of all of that when you have so much suffering going on? What's the point? They've got a new city, which is called Niam, which is going to have alcohol. That's by their own records. I'm talking about the Saudi authorities. It's going to have, hijab laws will be relaxed. Once again, these are by the own images that were released by the Saudi government. And the Saudi people are a conservative people. But what they want, it doesn't matter, because I'm sure he's saying, well, what are they going to do? Not vote for me next time? They didn't vote for me last time. Oh, wait a minute. There are no elections. Oh, how about that? So as long as they control the security services and the prisons and the justice system, then it's all good. Well, that's the way that they see it, because there will come a day, I believe, that they will need that popular support. And when it is no longer available, then it will be too late. Then you won't be able to just call that up at the last second. So listen, Dr. Yvonne, I want to thank you for joining us. It was great having you. I'm always happy to have you.
It's great to be talking to you as well, and I just want the Syrian people to know that you are in my prayers constantly. This has been the most devastating civil war that I can think of, and too many international players are now meddling in Syria. it will come to an end. Everything has an end. Everything has a beginning and everything has an end. And it will come to an end. And, let's pray for that in these last 10 days of Ramadan.
Well, with that being said, I guess because I'm the host of the show, I guess I'll have the final word. I'm very happy to be where I am right now, and I'm in Syria. It's not fun. I didn't say I was enjoying it, but I'm saying that I'm happy that I'm here because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us an opportunity to really make a difference. And I believe that the win is within our grasp if we give the people justice and we work for the sake of Allah. Then I believe we will have more popular support than we would ever need. And I truly believe that. And I think that in the coming days and months, inshallah ta'ala, the whole world will see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose the people of Sham for a reason, and it'll become apparent to all of them. We want to thank everybody for joining us. I am Bilal Abdul Kareem. Once again, I do want to call the people, if we could kind of end this broadcast with another ad of our Journalist Training Center that Sister Yvonne Ridley is endorsing, that we are running for refugees. We want to give them an opportunity to be able to support themselves, and we could really use your help. So if we could end this broadcast with our video, giving you an opportunity to donate towards that, it would be great. You can go to my Twitter page, which is Bilal Kareem. That's Bilal Kareem, and you can get the link so that you can donate towards that. Take a look at the video. I am Bilal Abdul Kareem. Jazakumullahu khaira. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Bilal Abdul Kareem, and I am a journalist, but you already know that part. So what am I doing here? Well, we want to announce the Journalist Education and Training Center for Refugees. What's that all about? Well, we are now going to give back to these communities. What we want to do is train the people who've lost their homes to have a career in journalism. Now, I've been in journalism for about 20 years now. So now this is my opportunity to give something back to the people, give them an opportunity to earn money, to take care of their families, and to give them an opportunity that they can now move away from needing aid or a food box or donations. Now, aid, food box, and donations are good, and they do need it, but it's time to break the cycle, and you can help do that. Why don't you click the link below, and you can find out more about our program and what we're trying to do here, and how you can help, especially in this blessed month of Ramadan. Let's give these people an opportunity to move forward and to move past the years of war. You know the saying, give a man a fish, feed him for a day. Teach him how to fish, feed him for a lifetime. My name is Bilal Abdul Kareem. Jazakumullahu khaira. Assalamu alaikum.